Moin, ihr wunderbaren Menschen des Interwebs. Ich begrüße euch ganz herzlich zurück zu meinem Let's Play von The Great Ace-Attorney Chronicles. Wir sind bei der Zeugenaussage The Asogi Papers stehen geblieben, nachdem sich hier die Herrschaften auf den Bänken und auf den Plätzen sehr lautstark dazu geäußert haben, dass Vigil doch sagen soll. Und wir werden uns einmal... As the warder responsible for condemned convicts, I attend to Mr. Asogi and kept watch over his cell. The night after he was found guilty in court, he was doing something with that will in his cell. We turned the cell inside out looking for it after the execution, but to no avail. I only found out about the Asogi papers when a directive came telling me to impound them. The document was in the folds of the fellow's robe that was left in his cell, a kimono, I think it's called. In his kimono? That's a lie. We searched every inch of the man's cell. We looked through all his clothes. It can't be true. Were you not satisfied with calling me a liar? The once, sir? Yeah, we There's nothing you can do about it now. You don't have any hold over me anymore. Over then, the hold you like to take on my cravat, of course. Is that what you're going to do, is it? Are you going to give me a good shake again, or are you too scared? Little and large. What a double act. We complied with Asogi's will as far as was possible. All of his personal effects were delivered to his family home in Japan. As a courtesy to the homeland of the most notorious killer our country has ever seen. And we were much obliged. I can confirm that all of my father's belongings arrived safely. Oi, and you cannot deny the handwriting is that of your old man, huh? Yes, there is no mistaking that it's my father's brushwork. Really? And this last will and testament was the man's last weapon, was it? I think we can safely assume that the convict was merely prattling, knowing that his end was nigh. So, counsel for the defense, your cross-examination, please. Yes, my lord. Und ich weiß auch ganz genau, was ich schon wieder angreifen werde. Dieser Zeugenaussage. Und zwar müsste das die letzte Aussage gewesen sein, die Caden getätigt hat, dass man diesen letzten Willen in einem Kimono gefunden haben soll. Mr. Asogi's kimono. Oi, the one he brought with him when he was locked up. Yes, he was permitted to have his personal effects with him during his incarceration, I understand. That's right, he was granted as much freedom as possible during the few days before his execution. Indeed, he had a number of items of personal significance, I remember. He was very reluctant to part with them. Some books, that kimono, his sword. His sword? Karuma, the famous sword of the Asogi clan. It bears the soul of my family. I don't doubt it, but I wasn't really getting at that. Forget it being the soul of the clan. Could the man have had a more obvious weapon? Have some respect, Ryunosuke. Respectful silence. The warders carry firearms at all times, and the inmates have shackles around their ankles. Ja, aber jetzt glaube ich ja noch mehr, dass in dem Schwert irgendwas ist. Wieso haben wir denn noch nichts gefunden? Das ergibt doch keinen Sinn. He couldn't have hurt anybody with that thing. Still, he was allowed a sword, but no writing materials? Oi. He wrote it well before he came to stay with us at Berkeley, you see. Dr. Mikotoba was asked to bring the necessary Japanese writing implements to the prosecutor's office. Suri inkstone, black sumi ink, and some hanchi rice paper, no doubt. I was present when he wrote it, but I'm sorry to say the letters just looked like a screaming mass of jet black earthworms to me. Are you feeling faint, Mr. Vigil? Mr. Vigil. Sir, it was Scarlet, sir. What? Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I didn't mean to blurt it out like that. Less swaying and more explaining would be helpful. Is it something about the testimony we just heard? Have you recalled something of importance? Something of importance? Possibly, or possibly not. I'm unable to tell which way he's leaning, I'm afraid. My lord, the defense asks that Mr. Vigil be permitted to supplement his testimony with this possibly or possibly not important detail. Permission granted. Go ahead, Mr. Vigil. Yes, it was Scarlet. As I remember it, the document was written in scarlet ink, but perhaps I'm mistaken. What? As I remember it, the document was written in scarlet ink, but perhaps I'm mistaken. Okay, also wenn das Scarlet Ink. Okay, Moment. Vorne ist jetzt alles unbedeutend. Soggy Papers, nee. Passport auch nicht. Nee. Ja, gut, der Ring hilft mir jetzt auch nicht wirklich weiter. Roman, Time of Death. Additional notes. Recent scarlet ink stains visible on the little and ring finger of the right hand, but no document in corresponding ink was found. Scarlet-colored writing is what you said you thought you saw, Mr. Vigil. And I believe that's exactly what you did see. Evers again, you've no evidence to say that. Have a look at this report. That's my brother's autopsy report. Yes, and there's something in here that's bothered me since I first read it. It states that scarlet-colored ink stains were noted on the fingers of the victim's right hand. Yes, so it does. Now, I'm not familiar with the habits of the British aristocracy, I freely admit, but I would hazard a guess that they don't all go around with ink stains on their fingertips, do they? Your wit is not appreciated. My brother was a well-bred and fastidious man. Should ink have soiled his fingertips, he would have cleaned them immediately. What is your point, counsel? My point is this, whatever Lord Clint von Zieks was writing in that unusual colored ink, it must have been directly before his death, because he died before he had the opportunity to clean his hands. I remember something troubled me at the time. At the scene, the lid of my brother's inkwell was open. But Clint was punctilious about such things. It seemed unusual. And no document penned in the color of the ink that was in the inkwell was ever found. So the document had disappeared. Are you suggesting that the document my father had in his hand that night in his cell was the same document that Lord Clint von Zieks was writing moments before his death? Then it was... If Mr. Vigil's testimony is to be believed, it can only mean that yes, Mr. Vigil, when you spotted Mr. Sogi with the document in his cell, his precise words were as follows, were they not? Alright then, but what's on the paper? A last will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now. Last will and testament? If the conversation really did go as Mr. Vigil says, then what we now know completely changes the meaning of what Mr. Asogi said. You really think? Mr. Vigil did indeed see the convict with a will, but it wasn't that of Genshin Asogi. It was the last will and testament of Lord Clint von Zieks. This is madness. My brother's last will and testament. That would mean that he had chosen to die. That is what it would mean, yes. No, impossible. That is utterly out of the question. Lord von Zieks. Clint was pursuing the professor. It consumed him day and night. Whatever happens, he would never have abandoned his investigation before its conclusion. Never. He wouldn't rest until the job was done, until the killer was caught. The idea that he would willingly accept his own death is obscene. And yet, we can be sure that he was writing his will moments before his death. And that Genshin Asogi came to be in possession of the document. Okay, also wenn ich mich wirklich richtig dran erinnere und Genshin Asogi wirklich gesagt hat, dass er nur ein Leben genommen hat, dann kann es tatsächlich sein, dass Genshin Clint umgebracht hat. Aber wie wir jetzt wissen, muss das ja einen bestimmten mein Gott, bestimmten Grund gehabt haben, so. So what could the will possibly have contained? Clearly something that couldn't be made public under any circumstances whatsoever, because armed with that document, my father was able to negotiate with the judiciary for his life. It was something so damning that it prompted the powers that be to enact the daring jailbreak plot. Yes, there can be no question that the will contained information of the utmost secrecy. No, it couldn't be. I've heard more than enough. Pursuing this notion of a phantom will nobody can attest to, having serves absolutely no purpose. No, my lord, that's unacceptable. What did you say, counsel? The last will and testament that Genshin Asogi had in his possession was that of Lord Clint von Zieks. All the testimony and evidence presented to the court has logically led us to that as a possibility. We have a duty to pursue the line of reasoning to its conclusion. But with no possible means of knowing the contents of the document, there is no line of reasoning to pursue. A reason why Lord Clint von Zieks, a man of high noble standing, would have chosen death. Information so secret, people in the judiciary would be willing to negotiate the jailbreak of a condemned killer. The only explanation that fits those facts is an unthinkable truth that turns absolutely everything on its head. But it's just too hideous. Said Naruhodo. However difficult the situation might become, you work with your client in pursuit of the truth. That's what you resolved to do when you entered the courtroom this morning, if I'm not mistaken. Susato. So hold your head high and keep soldiering on. Yes, you're right. 10 years ago, in his final moments, Lord Clint von Zieks left behind a will. A will that Genshin Asogi was able to use as a weapon to negotiate his escape from prison. In all probability, the details in the will were related to the professor case. The defense's last statement is mere conjecture. What are you getting at, man? Ryunosuke? As soon as these words come out of my mouth, there is no going back. I believe that the last will and testament of Lord Clint von Zieks was in fact a report, an accusation, a confession. You can do this, Mr. Naruhodo. I believe that what Lord Clint von Zieks actually penned that day was a confession. regarding the mass murderer known as the Professor and his true identity. Enough, Counsel. What are you saying? Do you even realize? A confession about the true identity of the Professor. That would mean... Lord Van Zieks, I appreciate this must be hard to take in. But it's the only explanation that fits. The killer that terrorized London a decade ago and became known as the Professor, the man believed to have murdered 5 members of the aristocracy, wasn't Genshin Wusste at all. It was in fact the man believed to have been the 5th victim. Lord Clint Van Zieks himself. It's finally open, is it? Pandora's box. This is too awful, poor Lord Van Zieks. I wonder though, did he never suspect? Lord Barak Van Zieks is a brilliant prosecutor. Is it conceivable that he didn't realize what his older brother really was? Lord Van Zieks. The Professor made use of an enormous hound as his murder weapon. Tell me, did your brother own a dog? Yes, he did. Balmon. He was a well-known hunting dog. People called him a giant. When my brother would go hunting in the forest of the grounds behind the house, he always took Balmon. After Clint's death, the creature passed away too. Almost as if he were following his master. He was a magnificent hunting dog, worthy of the Jewel-stud collar around his neck. A Jewel-studded collar. That's right. Das haben wir auch schon gefunden in einem Fall. Ich weiß jetzt nicht mehr ganz genau, welche Episode es war, aber das kam auch schon einmal vor. Some years ago now, it was stolen by a thief who broke into the house one night. Jewel-studded collar, stolen by a thief. It so happens that myself and my colleagues have come across such a collar during our time in London. How could you? There was an old emblem attached to the collar too, made of pure gold. Ah ja, das war mit dem Shakespeare-Dude, war das doch, glaube ich. Das war der Fall. It was topped with a small crown and bore an ornate capital letter B. An emblem bearing the initial B. Oh my, you know it? It's the insignia of the Baskerville family. What, the Baskerville? Why is that name coming up now? Baskerville is the family name of my late brother's widow. That pure gold emblem was an heirloom which Clint acquired upon their marriage. There can be no doubt then. The collar you've described was Balmok's. Family insignia of Lord Clint Week's widow? There was a considerable amount of blood on the collar when we saw it. Since we know the dog was used for hunting, it could have been from its quarry, of course. But it could equally have been from human prey. Ich muss sagen, ich habe tatsächlich damit jetzt nicht gerechnet, dass das so eine Wendung nimmt. So in fact, the person responsible for these murders of nobles and royals was a noble himself, and that threatened to be an enormous scandal that would irrevocably destabilize British society. My father knew that, and was using it to negotiate his way out of the unjust charges brought against him. But at the very last hour, those he'd bargained with betrayed him, slaying him mercilessly on foreign soil. Well, can you deny it, Lord Strongheart? 10 years have passed, and still now, the 6 million inhabitants of our great capital rest easy believing that justice was done. That though his anonymity remains, the diabolical murder was caught and executed. Very well then, you may have the truth. Tell me then, tell me what Clint really was. Lord Clint von Zieks was too pure of heart. When he became a prosecutor and went in pursuit of the black roots of crime, he drove himself into a corner. He came to the uncomfortable realization that to fight the most fiendish of criminals requires one to become even more fiendish oneself. The 19th century was a truly miraculous 100 years for Great Britain and indeed the whole world. New industry, new technology, and with the birth of the Metropolitan Police Service, new law and order. But these dazzling new developments meant ever deeper shadows were cast in society. Water sullied by factories, air thick with noxious fumes and crime, growing daily to fill the darkness. Lord Clint von Zieks made it his mission to combat that darkness, but as time went on, slowly ate at his soul, until eventually he was consumed. It's ironic, really, and somewhat surprising, that the truth has once again been unearthed by a Japanese. Once again? What do you mean? 10 years ago, your father, Genshin Wusste, turned up at my office one night. The professor. Yes, beyond all shadow of doubt, you must issue a warrant to search his home at once. Don't be absurd. The man comes from one of our country's most illustrious families. He's a paragon of justice here in the capital. Yes, that's the point. That's why none of you British can see it. He's using his noble status as a diversion whilst he commits these atrocious crimes behind the scenes. Do you have evidence? Nothing definitive as yet. But he keeps an enormous savage hound on the estate. We need the full support of the judiciary for this. We are up against a member of the aristocracy. The large family estate has a fierce guard dog. You should know that's commonplace here in Britain. I'm sorry, but I can't possibly put Scotland Yard onto this based on the 10 years accusation of a visiting student. So I turned down Asogi's plea, and as a result, he took it upon himself to visit the Von Zieks mansion on his own. We can only imagine now what happened between the two men. Though we know the outcome, of course. Lord Clint von Zieks perished. So in actual fact, Kazuma-sama's father did... He made the late Lord von Zieks meet the same fate. He put a permanent end to the professor killings by taking the drastic measure of ending the perpetrator's life. As soon as I heard. To the mansion. When I arrived, it was easy to grasp what had happened. And what about the will? Asogi must have already taken it. Nothing of that nature was found at the scene. We had no idea of the existence of such a document at the time. I was the only person who knew of the true identity of the professor, so I resolved to keep it a secret and to guard the secret to the bitter end. So you're admitting to it? That you were behind it all? It was you then who pinned the crimes on my father. I did what needed to be done in order to protect the law and order of the British Empire. Even if that meant employing an unforgivable ruse. Then it was you who arranged this fabricated evidence. I ordered that detective to take care of it, whilst keeping the truth from him, naturally. Obviously, he opposed me at first. Are you a rocker? You can't do something like that. There is no question that it was Asogi who murdered Lord von Zieks. The house staff have made statements that they saw the man running from the mansion that night. As well, I've no doubt it was the Japanese fellow. But we haven't got a shred of conclusive evidence against the man. And worse than that, he doesn't keep a dog. So we're short of a murder weapon to boot. And we are short on time, Gregson. We must put a stop to this man's rampage for the good of the country. So we will use whatever means necessary. Do I make myself clear, detective? Blamely. So that night 10 years ago, when I was attacked by those thugs in the back streets, and Genshin's ring was taken, that was him, was it? That was Gregson and some hired help. Then the detective handed the stolen ring to Dr. Wilson, who feigned its discovery from the victim's stomach during that autopsy. And in the light of that decisive evidence, Mr. Asogi was found guilty. However, behind the scenes, he had actually already struck a deal with his accusers, in which he agreed to silently accept the charges. But I just don't believe that part. As far as I knew the man, my father despised such underhand dealings. It was extremely easy to make him comply. You see, he had one crippling weakness. What weakness? Isn't it obvious? You, Kazuma Asogi. Perhaps you have no desire to return to your homeland, Asogi. Though I hear you have a 14-year-old son. Agree to cooperate and accept your guilt without contention, and you will see Japan and your son again. You scoundrel. Whether you choose wisely or not, it will be a closed trial by order of Her Majesty, so whatever rash claims you might make in court, we will have no trouble in stifling them. There is only one outcome for you, Asogi. The gallows. Don't forget that I still have a weapon at my disposal. A document revealing a truth that I know you are desperate to keep hidden. Yes, it hadn't escaped my mind, which is the only reason I'm willing to bargain with you. I only want to protect this country's law and order. You understand? So, what's it to be, Asogi? He did it for me? As I told him at the time, my motive was simply to protect Britain from the damage the truth would do. To protect his country's law and order, to protect this country's law and order at any cost. I've never dared let myself even consider this possibility until now. But in the light of all this, treachery, I have to ask. The mastermind behind the Reaper of the Bailey. Was it you, Lord Maid Stronghold? A rather brilliant idea, wouldn't you say, Lord Barak von Zieks? But the spirit of your late brother, that paragon of justice, should return to reap justice for his sibling. Could there be a more appetizing tale for London's masses, I ask you? I knew that she would play the part of perfection. But your role really wasn't that of some embodiment of death. No, you were London's guardian angel. An angel with bloody hands? I think not. Those who had cooperated with me already were only too happy to participate in my plan. Inspector Gregson, Dr. Wilson. My minions worked tirelessly to ensure that the finger of guilt could never come to rest on you. It's all thanks to them that you were exalted as the demigod the Reaper became. But Dr. Wilson left Britain 4 years ago when he was invited to work in Japan. So I had to employ the services of his young prodigy after that. Protégé. Dr. Courtney Syfe. So what with the execution of the professor and the subsequent reign of the Reaper of the Bailey? I've successfully safeguarded law and order in our mighty capital for the past decade. That is everything. My lords, ladies, and gentlemen, I do hereby confess, it was I who sired the concept of the Reaper. However, let me say in my defense, it was all for the preservation of law and order across the entire empire. There is no one left now who can reveal the precise truth of what happened 10 years ago. Therefore, this trial can go no further. Now, I would like to entreat all those present. Beyond these 4 walls, nobody need know the truth. Even Her Majesty must be protected from this. I trust you all appreciate the importance of my requests. It is, of course, for the good of the country. Can he do this? Can the trial really end now? I have one last question. For the accused Lord von Zieks. Of course, I know that you're a highly accomplished prosecutor, so I find it hard to believe that you didn't have any doubts at all. That you never suspected your older brother. Yes, the same thought occurred to me. It was only once, but yes, I couldn't say that I never had my doubts. My brother's sense of justice was extremely strong, perhaps too strong, I observed. At that time, there were members of the aristocracy who were bleeding the country dry for their own gain. And since they were nobles, they were untouchable. For my brother, it was a source of great turmoil. And coincidentally, at the same time, the professor began his terrifying reign. During the time of the professor killings, my brother did not appear to be himself. That made you suspect? Yes. But it was only once, not more. Only once? Really? Clint wasn't the culprit. That was my conclusion at the time. And I still believe that now. Do you have any evidence to support that idea? The third victim was the Lord Chief Justice at the time. It was he who had recognized my brother's potential and trained him as a prosecutor. No matter what the circumstances, it's unthinkable that my brother could have killed his friend and mentor. That will do. Neither Clint von Zieks nor Genshin wusste still walk this earth. However much we debate this matter now, we cannot hope to reach a conclusion. There are only 2 excellent pieces of evidence from the time. The Wabakon ring that acted as the incriminating evidence to condemn Genshin wusste, and the 3-page last will and testament penned in the black ink and left behind by the man. The wretched truth of what happened is exactly as I have explained. Later today I will present myself at the Ministry of Justice for whatever sanction is deemed appropriate. That is all. Court is adjourned. Können wir einen Einspruch einlegen, bitte? Danke. Thank you, Kazuma. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have made this 11th hour discovery. My lord, I'm afraid I must insist the trial continues. I beg your pardon. As the court has been reminded today already, we must stop at nothing to uncover the whole truth. And to that end, one particular statement made by somebody in this courtroom moments ago revealed a very subtle contradiction. What contradiction? But all I did was ask the accused one simple question. Well, it began with Lord von Zieks and his recollection about his brother, but Lord Strongheart didn't permit the defendant to speak at length. I merely pointed out that we can draw no further useful conclusions here, so where on earth is the contradiction? One of them definitely just said something contradictory. It's time to identify who. It was Lord Strongheart, I'm sure of it. Something he said was slightly off. Come on, Ryunosuke, think back over his words, find the problem. Neither Clint von Zieks nor Genshin Wusste still walks this earth. However much we debate this matter now, we cannot hope to reach a conclusion. There are only two extant pieces of evidence from the time. The ring and the 3-page last will and testament penned in black ink and left behind by the man. Lord Strongheart, would you care to explain? Explain what, Counsel? Among the statements you made just a few moments ago, something you said was inconsistent with a certain piece of evidence we have. Inconsistent? And whilst an inconsistency remains, the defense has a right to pursue an explanation. Ryunosuke, what? Let me warn you about the statements you are making, Counsel. They may very well prove fatal. You claim my words contain a contradiction, with which piece of evidence I ask you? Mit den Asogi-Papern. This here is the will left behind by Mr. Asogi. The 2-paged will. Yet, moments ago, your precise words were the 3-page last will and testament. Could it be that originally there was a 3rd page? For a moment I thought perhaps you would identify something worthwhile, but it's a mere trifle, I see. A trifle. Governor Caden, what can I do for you, sir? You were present when the Japanese man penned his last will and testament. I'm quite certain, my lord, that there was a 3rd page at the time. Only the first 2 pages were the actual will, though. If I mind correctly, the 3rd was a message to his lad back in Japan. For legal purposes, we required only his will. And we wouldn't have wanted any uncomfortable words about Britain to get back to Japan, huh? So it was decided that the 3rd page ought not to be sent. How dare you make that decision? I had a right to know what it said, to hear my father's final words to me. The courtroom is no place for sentimentality, Counsel. Sentimentality. As it happens, I have the 3rd page of the document with me here and now. Na klar. Okay, ja, das habe ich random mitgenommen. Macht Sinn. My father's message. It will be given to you at the end of these proceedings. It will be too late once the trial is over. We need to know what it says now. Even the slightest thing may give us a vital clue. My lord, the defense calls for Genshin Asogi's last words to his son to be read out loud before the court now. Your request is denied. The inevitability? Maudlin words can be of no consequence now. The prosecution agrees the court should know the content of that messages. Every possible piece of evidence must be thoroughly examined. Very well then, Governor Caden. You will read the third page of the document for all present to hear. Only I should point out, my lord, that I can actually read Veran language. This beautiful handwriting, shame on you, Barry. If I could be of assistance here, I would be happy to translate the words into English for the court. You're still here, are you, Dr. Mikotoba? Naturally, I consider myself a member of the judiciary, albeit a lowly one, but perhaps I should quietly withdraw after I've translated Genshin's message. Your cooperation is much appreciated. Kazuma, the truth is shrouded in darkness, a darkness only our clan's great sword can pierce. Mighty Karuma, twist thy head and watch them fall, all thy mortal foes. That's the end of the message, it would seem. The haiku poem? Twist thy head. Mother. What is Karuma? The name of the Sogi clan's famous sword. A razor-sharp blade known to all, passed down for generations. It embodies the Japanese spirit. It's not known to me. It's the katana sword that was submitted as evidence earlier in these proceedings. The one worn by the prosecution counsels when we confronted Inspector Gregson. Also hatte ich doch recht mit dem Schwert. All these procrastinations are beginning to try my patience. Adjournment of this court is long overdue. As the preceding judge, I have been as accommodating as possible of the will of the courtroom. However, despite all that, no new information has come to light. In pursuit of justice, Lord Clint von Zieks tragically lost all sense of morality. When he murdered his former mentor, clearly he was already devoid of his normal faculties. How dare you? I refuse to believe that of my brother. Too much time has passed. We cannot ever hope to know more than we do now. Especially since the alleged will that he penned in his final moments appears to have been lost forever. A strong-hearted. You appear to be in something of a hurry to wrap things up. I wonder why. We've heard you state time and again during these proceedings that everything you did was in the interests of protecting British law and order. And I stand by that. Without the Reaper, we could never have achieved the reduction in crime the capital has seen. What about Inspector Gregson then? And Dr. Wilson? They were no criminals. You used them to achieve your ends, and then you had them killed. However you dress it up, there was nothing fair or just about that. Not strong-hearted. What exactly is it that you're hiding? Dr. Mikotoba, were you not to quietly withdraw after the translation of your former associate's will? In this courtroom, no argument carries weight unless it is supported by evidence. And it would seem that the defense has no more evidence to present. Doch haben wir. In dem Schwert ist ein Beweisstück drin. In which case, I hereby order all discourse from these proceedings to be struck from the record. This is my last chance. Ja, und es tut mir jetzt auch furchtbar leid, weil das ein Cliffhanger des Todes ist. Aber es wird hier noch einmal einen letzten Cut geben. Und dann der nächste Part wird wahrscheinlich der finale Part werden. Aber da ich jetzt sehe, wir sind bei 45 Minuten, werde ich hier leider Gottes einen Cut setzen. Es tut mir furchtbar leid. Ich bedanke mich ganz herzlich fürs Zusehen und wir werden uns im nächsten Part wiedersehen. Zum Finale. Ich verspreche euch, dass ich die Parts relativ zeitnah hochlade, dass ihr nicht zu lange dann auf das Finale warten müsst. Es ist nur, das Rendern ist, je länger der Part ist, desto länger dauert das alles und deswegen würde ich hier gerne einmal einen Cut setzen und wir sehen uns, wie gesagt, im nächsten Part wieder. Es tut mir wirklich leid. Vielen Dank fürs Zusehen, bis zum nächsten Mal und ciao.